Okay, so what we're going to do now is build the foot roll rig. So go ahead and zoom in, do shift middle mouse button and bring the shin and foot into focus. Now this is going to get a bit technical. So what I want you to do is go ahead and click on this bone, go to the bone constraints, and here I'm just going to refer to this bone as our IK bone because it has the IK constraint on it. Now what I want you to notice about how the IK system works is that the outside bone that we're using to perform the IK is this bone right over here. So this means that in order for this to work, this bone cannot be involved with a parent-child relationship between any of the bones that are part of the IK bone. So here, if you press the G key, you will notice that in order for the IK system to work, a collision needs to happen with the IK bone, right? Using the bone that we've specified here in the target. So that's the first concept I want you to understand about how the IK system works. Now, in order to create the foot roll, what we're going to do is basically make the foot and the toe bone as the outside bones, meaning that they're not going to be involved with a parent-child relationship with the IK bone. And then we will let the user use this bone to simply rotate the foot. So if we want this to happen, we first have to go over here and simply unlock the rotation. So when you press the R key, you will be able to rotate the foot. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and click on this foot bone, switch to edit mode, go to the bone tab and remove the shin as the parent. Over here, go ahead and hover your mouse, do Control C to copy the name of this foot bone. Go ahead and switch to pose mode, click on this IK bone, go to the bone constraints tab, and over here we're going to simply switch this out with this foot bone. Just do Control V. So here you will see that when we click on the foot bone and press the G key, right, this is now an outside bone. So when a collision happens, it will simply do the same thing. Now, why did we do this? Because it will allow us to actually create a foot roll, right? When the collision happens with the IK bone. And later what we're going to do is simply involve this bone with parent-child relationships to allow us to rotate the foot. So what we're going to do is actually create a bone to see how this is going to work. So go ahead and switch to edit mode, click on the tail of this bone, press the E key, and here you're going to take the tail of this new bone and put it right over here where the green line is. Basically just imagine the green line as your ground plane. Go ahead and click on the body of this bone, press the Y key to sever all the connections, go to the bone tab and make sure that the deform is off. And here we're simply going to call this bone M dot foot dot roll dot B dot L and enter. Now we're going to have another version of this bone and we'll simply change this letter to A. So what we want to do is make this bone the parent of this bone. So go ahead and click this, press the shift key down, click on this one, do Control P and do keep offset. Now go ahead and switch to pose mode. Now here notice that this toe bone is the child of this bone and this bone is the child of this bone. So when you press the R key and rotate the parent, because it's going to rotate the child, a collision is going to happen with the IK bone, which will give us the ability to start to see the idea behind foot roll, right? So here we're basically lifting up the foot. Now if we go down this way, you will see that the foot will basically start to roll on its heel. Now why is this happening? It's because this bone over here is no longer colliding with the IK bone. right? So this is how this idea works. So go ahead and do Alt R to reset the rotation. Now what we're going to do is go ahead and switch to edit mode, click on this bone, do Shift D to duplicate, right click to cancel, and just do Alt F to flip its direction. Okay, and make sure that the deform is off, and over here of course we're just going to change this to A.L and enter. Now what we're going to do is make this bone the child of this new bone that we've created. So go ahead and click this, press the Shift key down, click on this one, do Control P and do keep offset. Now go ahead and switch to pose mode. So here if we click on our first bone that we've created, press the R key, it still works the same way, right? Now if we click on this bone, which is now the parent of this bone, if we press the R key, you will see that basically what this bone will allow us to do is roll the foot on its heel when it goes up. And when this bone goes down and hits the ground plane, right, it will basically make it where this bone then simply lifts up the foot like this. Okay. Now in order to do this, we're going to need basically a touch bone to allow the user to perform this action. So go ahead and switch to edit mode, click on the tail of this bone, press the E key and extrude out a bone over here. This is going to be our touch bone. Go ahead and press the Y key to sever the connections, remove the deform, and over here we're just going to call this foot dot touch dot roll dot L and enter. Okay, now here we're going to basically take this bone and make it the child of the foot touch bone. So go ahead and click this, press the Shift key down, click on this one, do Control P and do keep offset. Now here if you switch to pose mode, click on this bone and press the R key, you'll see that here we're basically starting to tie in everything together. Okay, now what I want you to do is go ahead and click on this bone. Now obviously we only want the user to simply rotate the bone like this. So go ahead and go to the data tab and turn on the axis. So this means that we want the user to really just rotate this bone around the x-axis. This means that we really don't need to use quaternion in this case, right? Here we're just simply going to switch this to XYZ Euler, right? Now why did we choose this configuration? This is because the first axis is the x-axis, right? And we know that the x-axis is always about the local axis of your object. So in this case, for this bone, the dominant axis is the x-axis. So this is why we chose XYZ Euler. Now here this means that we can simply just lock these two axes and only let the user rotate around the x-axis. Now what I want you to notice over here is that when you press the R key and rotate it clockwise, notice that the numbers over here are going negative. Okay, now when we go counterclockwise, they go positive. So we're going to use these numbers to allow these bones to move in the way we want them to create the foot roll. So to do this, go ahead and click on this bone, press the Shift key down and click on this bone first. Now do Shift Control C, and here we're going to do copy rotation. Of course the bone is just going to rotate to wherever this bone is going. So this means that we have to actually change this to local space, right? Both of them to local space. Now you know how local space works. If this bone rotates in its local space, it will cause this bone to rotate in its local space, right? That's the idea behind it. So what we're going to do now is basically limit the rotation of this bone based on the numbers that we saw here, based on the clockwise and the counterclockwise direction. So to do this, go ahead and add a limit rotation. Make sure that this also is in local space. Make sure you do for transform. And here we're simply using the X axis. So here we're going to just enable this. Now here it says minimum and maximum, right? We know that the minimum is really going to be the negative value. So here we're just going to type in minus 30, right? The reason we did this is because we saw that when we click over here and press the R key to rotate, we are getting negative numbers. So here, if you press the R key, you'll see that we're simply limiting the rotation of this foot, right, on that negative 30. So basically, it starts to roll on its heel and it stops. So this means that we can actually do the same thing with this bone, right? We can simply take the positive values when we press the R key to rotate this way. Now notice that over here, because we kept the max to 0, when we get the positive numbers, this bone is not going to do anything because we're not letting it, right? So what I want you to do is go ahead and click on this one, press the shift key down, click on this one, do shift control C, and do copy rotation. Do the same thing, local space and local space. Go ahead and add a limit rotation, local space for transforms X. And over here, we're just going to say 90 because we want to let this bone work with the positive values. So here you will see that when you press the R key and go counterclockwise, it will let the foot basically tilt up, right? And if we go down, it's simply rotate on its heel, right? So this is how this idea of the foot roll module works. Okay, it's a pretty straightforward concept if you think about what's going on. Now, the other thing that we want to add is that when we press the R key and go this direction, we don't want the toes to point in the direction that the foot is because we want them to stick to the ground. Okay, so how do we do this? Let's go ahead and click this to Alt-R to reset the rotation. So this means that we basically first need to give the ability to the user to rotate the toes when they are using the IK system. So this means that we need to give a touch bone to the toes. Now remember, the FK bones already have a touch bone, so the IK will have their own touch bone. Go ahead and switch to edit mode, click on this joint over here, press the E key, press the Y key and extrude at a bone and put it right about here. Click this, press the Y key to sever the connections, go to the bone tab and make sure that the deform is off. And over here, we're going to call this toe dot touch dot IK dot L and enter. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is go ahead and switch to pose mode. So here, what we're going to do is simply tell the toe bones to copy the transforms of this bone. So go ahead and click on this bone, press the shift key down, click on this bone over here, do shift control C and do copy transforms, right? So here you will notice that right now this bone is not involved with a parent-child relationship. So it's just going to stay like this. But what I want you to notice over here is that now when you click this, press the R key, right? It goes up, but when it goes down, notice that how the toes are staying on the ground. Okay, so that's how that idea is going to work. So of course we need to somehow tie this bone with the foot roll system. So what we're going to do first is actually go ahead and click on this, and over here we should actually change this to ik.l because this really belongs to the IK system. Okay, so what I want you to do is go ahead and switch to edit mode, click on this joint, press the E key and extrude out a bone. Go ahead and click on this bone, press the shift key down, click on this one, do Control Alt A to align it, and click on it, press the Y key to sever the connections, make sure that the deform is off. In here, what we're simply going to call this, because this is really going to be used by the touch bone itself, we'll just call this m dot toe dot socket dot ik dot l and enter. Okay, so what we want to do is to go ahead and click on this new touch bone that we've created, press the shift key down and click on this one, do Control P and do keep offset, right? So right now, not much is really happening. Basically, what this means is that you can click on this and press the G key and move this whole thing. So we need to tie this whole system together so this bone really doesn't rotate if we rotate this. Okay, so the way we're going to do this is first go ahead and switch to edit mode over here, click on this bone, and we just want to make sure that the parent is not there. So what we're going to do is actually click over here, press the E key, press the Z key, and just create another socket over here. Go ahead and click this. Press the Y key to sever the connections. Go ahead and uncheck this, and here we're going to call this m.toe dot socket, and here I guess we can call it .2.ik.l and enter, right? So this is our first socket and this is our second. So now what we're going to do is basically click on this bone, press the shift key down, click on this one, do Control P and do keep offset. Now we need to tie this bone. So here, because we want basically the touch bone to rotate when the foot tilts up, we are simply going to make this bone the child of this bone, right? We would have to, because this is the bone that allows us to roll the foot on its heel. So just do Control P and here just do keep offset. Okay, so now if you go ahead and switch to pose mode, you will notice that when we click over here and press the R key to lift up the foot, the touch bone goes, and if we go ahead and put this down, the touch bone stays. Okay, so this is how this concept is now going to work. So now the only thing left over here is that we want to be able to simply rotate the foot. Okay, so this means that here we need to actually click on this bone. You can see that it has no parent. We're going to press the shift key down and click on this bone, do Control P and do keep offset. Now if you switch to pose mode, click over here, press the R key. This will give us the ability to rotate the foot. We can rotate it this way. We can also click over here and simply roll the foot, and we can also click on the touch bone and rotate the toes. Okay, now go ahead and press the A key and do Alt R to reset the rotation. Now the last bone that we need to create is basically going to be the bone that will draw a line to this pole target over here, our knee. So here we're just going to switch to edit mode, click on this joint over here, press the E key, press the Y key, and just extrude out a bone like this. Go ahead, click this, and here we're just going to call this m.knee.line.ik.l and enter. Okay. Now here we're going to obviously click on this bone, press the shift key down, click on this one, just do Control P and do keep offset. And here let's switch to pose mode, and here what we want to do is actually click on this bone, then zoom in, press the shift key down, click on this one, do Shift Control C, and here we're just going to do stretch to, just like before. So now when you click on this, you can see that it's going to stretch. Okay, and now when you click over here, everything should work the way it was. Right, and now here if you press the G key on this, you can actually lift up the foot. Okay, so that's how this whole idea is going to work. So go ahead and just park this whole thing over here, and we're going to go under File, do Save As, and let's save this as Rigging Lesson 03 Y.blend. So I'll see you in the next lesson. Thank you.